To launch this very special book, we invite on stage Donskobar, Junisha Khongwir, and Karen Lalrindiki, Donoghue. I also invite to the stage contributors to the book, Ms. Sangi and Pif Larohlu, Principal, Muso High School. I also invite on stage Reverend Dr. Brother Albert Longley Dakar, Principal of St. Anthony's College, Shillong. Mr. Nathaniel Majau, Project Director, Northeast India AV Archive. Author and graphic novelist Parismita Singh. And the Festival Director, Khongwir Kurkalang. A round of applause, please.
A very good evening to all who had gathered here and to visit the release and launching of the book Stories from the Valley. And I want to thank Ms. Junisha Khongwir and Ms. Karen L. Donoghue to involve me in this wonderful program. The valley which the book is about, even though I myself have not yet opened and read the book, which will be launched in a few moments from now, I myself being one of the former residents of this valley, I know that this book will have a great impact in bringing back the memories of the wonderful past which I have tasted and experienced, and also in remembering the valley, many of whom, valley people, many of whom are not with us anymore. Now, books are a treasure, and I want to thank Ms. D. Junisha Khongwir and Ms. Karen L. Donoghue and all the people who are involved in making this book. Good books have been launched this evening. Several books have been launched. I've seen it. Books for children, books for adults, and books about all sorts of things. Good books are not only a source of knowledge, but a very important document for the future generation. And it's a great honor for me to be here today. And on behalf of the people of the valley, and to promote the value of good books and to honor knowledge, I will be very proud and I will joyfully release this esteemed book, which is written by Ms. Junisha Khongwir and Karen L. Donoghue. I will not say much words, but before launching this book, let me quote some of the world-renowned writers and personalities on their comment about the value of good books. Books are a treasure. Ernest Hemingway says there is no friends as loyal as a book. Napoleon Bonaparte says, show me a family of readers, and I will show you the people who move the world. Then French philosopher and scientist René Descartes says, the reader of all good books is like a conversation with the finest minds of past centuries. And Carl Sagan, one of the renowned scientists and writers we have known, says, one glance at the book and you hear the voice of another person, perhaps someone dead for 1,000 years. To read is to voyage through time. So once again, I want to thank the two young ladies, the two writers, for involving me in this great, wonderful gathering and program. So that's all I can say. We will hear more about the books from these two young ladies as they will be interviewed, I think, in a few moments from now on. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Silo. I would now like to call Ms. Junisha to read a note.
Good evening, everyone. This is truly overwhelming. Thank you so much for being here and supporting us. Before we launch the book, I would like to read a note that was sent to us from our friends from Japan, who are producers of the book. That is Nobuyuki Kunishi-san, who is the director of Asia and Middle East program, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. So the message is, dear esteemed participants, we would like to thank you from the bottom of the heart for joining us today for this wonderful moment of celebration of the publication of Stories from the Valley, a book we all have been eagerly waiting. First of all, we would like to express my deepest gratitude to all the Mizo people involved in the lengthy interviews that form the basis of this book. We would also like to pay tribute to the members of the Northeast India AV Archive for their tireless efforts from planning to research in the preparation of this publication. Thank you for your cooperation. We were able to shed light on the buried history of the Mizo people, their resilient spirit and traditional culture. Now I would like to introduce briefly about our foundation to you. The Sasakawa Peace Foundation, so-called SPF, was established in 1986 and has been committed to promoting international exchange and cooperation since its inception. To address the diverse and complex issues of the 21st century, we have leveraged our unique freedom as a private foundation to work in partnership with a diverse range of domestic and international collaborators. Since the establishment of the Northeast India AV Archive in October of 2019, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation has continued the program, so-called Preserving and Sharing Histories and Memories, in Northeast India with the partnership of NEIAV. We believe that by bringing this book to you, we could not only expand the deep understanding of the Mizo people in India and the world, but also contribute to the realization of a diverse and inclusive Asian society, which is one of the mission of our foundation. I would like to take this opportunity to express once again my deepest gratitude to all those who are involved in the issue of this precious book. We look forward to continuing our work hand in hand with the people of Northeast India. Thank you very much, Nobuyuki Konishi-san.
So thank you everyone for having me here, because it's truly been a privilege to have it. I received an advance copy of the book. So I thoroughly recommend that those of you who can get a copy. And it's really been a privilege to read this book and also to be asked to come in and be a part of this conversation. Because I think increasingly I feel that to be able to make a book is a privilege, because it is such a labor of love, as well as everything that labor entails, all the work and the tears and the sweat and everything. And I think the book really is a testament to not just the labor of your putting it together and your photography and your writing, but also of the people of the worlds that the book documents and reflects upon, and the looking into the past as well as into the future. So I'm going to begin a conversation around some of the themes that have interested me in the book. And then maybe we open it up for questions after that, yeah? So, and then we open it up for questions. So to begin with, of course, this is a wonderful book because it looks at several things. It looks at photography and writing, as well as, and it's a very special kind of writing because, as Karen puts it, it is, let me find the term. She has a beautiful, it's a writing that arises out of a new and demanding form of remembering. So it is looking at oral, I'm borrowing a phrase from the book. So it is a form of telling, documentation, oral history, and as well as, and at the same time, it's also an interplay of June's photographs and Karen's writing. So there are just so many wonderful things happening in this book that my first question to both of you is, of course, like, how did this, what was the origin? How did you come up with this wonderful idea and of photos and oral history? So yes.
Thank you so much, Parismita. So from the Northeast India AV Archive, we have a project, which is an oral history project, which we've started 2 years ago in 2020, almost 3 years now. So what happened was, this project, because we were, by our funders, they want to project peace building. So that was the main, theme for them to be, supporting us as an archive. So when that project came up, and I remember, Karen was going through a bit in her life, which she will talk about it, I guess. But suddenly I was like, let's just stop everything, because this book actually kind of allows us to collaborate in this project. I mean, so what better way to collaborate than with my best friend? First of all, I'm from Shillong. I mean, I'm from Meghalaya, from Lalrindiki, then, in Shillong, and then she from the community. I mean, what better way to kind of, go into and take this journey together? So, we talked with Karen, and then somehow, this project it was born out of, the love and the grief that we were bonding at that particular time. I think Karen can also add on to that.
Sure. So, thanks, Parismita. That was very kind of you to say all of those kind words about our book. June and I have been friends for almost 2 decades now. Please do not guess our ages. We are still, yeah. Anyway, no. It's a book that's born out of grief and love. And as Parismita spoke about, I spoke a lot about remembering in the book. Remembering not just in terms of trying to recollect things, but remembering as a new way of, in a way that is new and demanding, as a salve, as a way to heal, because I don't know if can I talk about mums? Yeah. Yes. So my mom fell very ill about a year back, and I was at my wit's end, and as you can imagine, I sort of fell apart, and I reached out to June, and yeah, so she was there for me, and so the book is born out of that. And promise you I wouldn't cry, I'm sorry, but also this book is a homage to June's dad, Donskobar, who taught us to follow the love, and so that is what we've done with this book. We just follow the love.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and and I think some of this comes through. Really, I think in some ways, yeah, it really, I think, so much of this difficult work of remembering and art. I mean, I think that is where perhaps we reach out to art in some ways to. So I mean, I think what's been really amazing. I mean, what is, I think, very, very, for me, what was very touching, or that really touched me in some sense, is this reaching out from a personal moment of crisis into a kind of collective, because there is. Thank you. Yeah. So there is, but you only mention, you sort of just mentioned that at one point, there is this moment of personal crisis. But essentially, this is a book about a collective. So, you're able to do this, you're able to move, which is such a tremendous thing to do. You're able to move from this personal moment of anguish into a reaching out towards a collective form of history. It is history. Because there are also a lot of women's voices in the book. These are voices of the ordinary, which I think sometimes in the shadow of great crisis otherwise, there's the meso-insurgency and, the conditions that made people migrate. So which, and I think, which brings me to the second question of like, so there is, you have to help me with the pronunciation of the word, yeah, because yes. So June, she writes of how of the Mizo word for photography is thalak. Thalak, okay, thalak, which is to capture the soul. Right, and then she has a very interesting, and I think they have this very interesting engagement, because in the book, where they speak about how every time June would hear the word talak, she thought that in her conversation, she thought she's speaking about photography. But actually the word was boithak, which is the word for difficult. So that also brings us to the question of, that is the other element that comes in the book, that of language, right? So can you tell us, so maybe just, going from the last question about photography capturing the soul, and then the difficulty of the work as well.
Thank you, Parismita, for that question. Thank you so much, because I remember when we went up to Mizoram, actually we went to trace back a few of the families and who moved from Happy Valley, they went back to Mizoram. And over the phone, Karen would keep saying, boithak, boithak. And then I'm like, oh, she's talking, we're making a photo book, So, and I was very, very like, oh, she's really like into it. Then later on, and I told her, you keep saying boithak to everyone, like you're just embarrassing us, we haven't even made the book yet. And then she said, no, it means not sure. Then I was like, what are you not sure about? Like, we already have went forward with. Then she said, no, because, sometimes it's difficult to meet people, because when she goes to Mizoram, everyone wants to meet her. So it was difficult to meet everybody. But yeah, coming to the question, so that is the base of the story of Boithak. And coming to the question, I think for this project, like, you say you photograph with your eyes, but for me it was more of listening. I think I listened more than I kind of look at the visuals, because as they're narrating the stories, I remember so many of them, like, the entire atmosphere was very intense, because they're talking about the love of a dead one, they're talking about grief, they're talking about belonging. So for me to just raise my camera and start clicking those moments was, I feel like, I should take a step back and say, just listen first, listen. And don't worry about, even if the moment doesn't arrive, it's all right. So that's how I went on with this. I kept listening, and I photographed by listening. So this book is that, photograph by listening. And I remember one instant, Lai mom is not here, but Lai's mom, who she talked about, this when her son was taken away from her. So we finished the interview, we took it outside of the house. And then she just took my hand and she's like, come, I want you to photograph something. And I was not ready, because as you know, people, photographers here, Anurag, everybody would know this, because when you move from, indoors or outdoors to indoors, suddenly you have to change all your settings. But there she was, just laying out, the elements of her son's last, so to say, remnants, like he had with him his wallet and his packet of cigarette. And she wanted me to click a picture right then, and I was not ready at all. Technically, I was not ready at all, but I did try to take the photograph, and it did come very blurry, and it was not like the best photograph. But when I went back to the edit, and then I looked at it, and I said, this moment is important, and it need not be perfect, it need not be the best, well-exposed photograph, but that moment is captured. So I just decided that with our editor, our layout editor, he was like, oh, this is not right. But I'm like, no, we have to keep it. Like, what will they say about your photography? I said, who cares about it? But it's the story that matters, So we just decided to just keep that photograph, which is towards the end of the story, because that moment for me was very, very important as a photographer. I really don't call myself a photographer, but rather a storyteller. But yeah, that was a moment for me as, somebody who makes images, to kind of step back and look and what are we actually taking, and what are we actually, we have to learn to actually listen to our stories before we actually make the photographs. Yeah.
I just want to add a bit to that. So if you go through the book, you go through our exhibition, which is an extension of the book, you will see that, because she was saying that it's very difficult for me to understand what is being said, I had to keep translating for her. But I think that translated so beautifully in the book, because we went on a journey together, but it was, we were like tangential journeys, So the images are not literal interpretations of what is being written, which I love so much. And so that's given to me a depth and an abstractness to the book that adds to, the richness of the narrative that we're trying to present. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Yes, oh, that is such a beautiful thing, like to photograph by listening, like to create images rather by, and I think I think especially doing this kind of work with the community, it really helps you reflect on your work, but also to sort of take off on like this, to continue this, what you touched upon, the question of language. So, that's what this book is really so fascinating, because it is also, I also found the whole interplay of language very experimental, as well as something that really captured the essence of the project, right? Because what you have is because there is, along with the parallel interplay of the images and the text, you also have the meso text and the English text. So there is this constant interplay between these two languages that is woven through and done really, really beautifully. Of course, I don't speak Mizo, but it is such a, but even for someone like me who does not speak the language, and you don't speak the language either, right?
I don't.
Yes, that. And but to have this parallel text, with its own, with its type of, with the text there, it's very powerful. So how did you, so can you tell us a little bit about how you made all the I'm also interested in technical decisions, and how you came about, how you basically worked on the question of the text, Mizo and English.
Shall I? So, so the thing is that as Indians, I think most of us are very easily multilingual. There is hardly a casual conversation, colloquial conversation that we have, for instance, in Shillong, where I'm constantly switching between Hindi, English, Mizo, and some broken Khasi. So it comes very naturally to us. So that was one of the reasons that we decided to do this interplay. And it's not only bilingual, there's also a lot of Khasi words in there. And so, and it flowed from a natural, this desire to kind of capture how we actually converse in real life. So that was one of the thoughts there. The second and more important thing, I'll touch upon it and then June can elaborate, is that we decided very early on that this book, we intend to write academic papers from it, oral history papers, but we decided very early on that the book is meant for the people of the community. We went wherever we went, and maybe because I was so familiar to them that they dared, pardon my language, but they could ask me the question of when can we read it? And when you see such tangible, such expressions of excitement, palpable expressions of excitement, we said we have to write this book, and it has to be written, it has to be read by the people of the community. It has to be accessible to them. But we also wanted to keep in mind that there would be a general audience who read this book as well. And so we made that decision to make it in both Mizo and English, with a smattering of Khasi words, because it is Shillong after all, very, very early on in the book. And I think that interplay, it was a risk that we took, but when we see the look of just joy on people's faces when they realize that they can read the Mizo, or our friends here who can read the English, has just been rewarding and really worth it. So June, would you like to add to that?
So as like I said, I curate exhibitions for the Northeast India AV Archive. One thing that I learned from my experience as being the curator there is that whenever we take these mini exhibitions, outside of Shillong, and actually to the villages, some of the exhibitions we took to Pudursla and then Siju and then Bakmara. So these are the collection of photographs that actually were unknown. But when we took it back then, back in those places, people could actually see themselves in photograph for the first time. And that made me think, like, what are we doing? Most of us as researchers, as academicians, we often take from them, you know, we go to villages for our research, for this, for that, but how many times do they get to actually see themselves or read about themselves in the language that is easy and accessible for them? So I think that was one of the main things that when I spoken with Karen, I said, this book is not for, you know, maybe for the academic circle, but it's more for the people, because they need to know, for the community, because they need to see themselves in these photographs. That's why giving back to community and making them see and would able to read. That's why I think in the book, if you see, especially the conversations, we kept it as it is. We did not change, we did not rephrase. We kept that same essence. Like you will find, like reading the book, like, oh my God, the grammar, this, that, but please don't mind all that. That's how we all speak. We are all not perfect in our tenses. We are all not perfect in grammar, you know. Just let it be, just let it be. And Karen, this beautiful thing of writing the poems that stitch the, you know, the from one sequence to the other, and that's what led the book to be what it is, because it is through her writings and also how she beautifully introduces each chapter, so that people could actually get a sense of what this chapter is all about. And that is what, you know, that is what made me feel when we both look at the edit. I think, I don't know if our layout designer is here, how many times you've changed the book. I mean, like 100, I don't know how many times have we changed the book and, you know, making these decisions, but you know, that was one of the main things, to kind of allow the community to kind of read what they have given us, and that is very important for us.
And I think, but even at the level of stylistic, it's working really well. You know, it's sort of, I think, which must have been tough to do for the designer. But it's, I mean, you can really see all the work and so much, and also the care. You know, I think it's at the level of whether it's your engagement with the community, with the dialogue, the photographs, the editing, the bilingual, and the play of languages. I think what's really what comes through very strongly is the care that's gone into the book. You know, it's just really a beautifully produced book as well. Mary, how are we doing for time? So one last question. One last question. Yes. Yeah. So then. Is there something you? Yeah. I mean, so. I mean, if there's something you wish to speak about, you also. Yeah. So yes. So the other question was. About the stories, right? The stories that you document, and you write about how it's you know, the stories are a testament of how diasporic communities form, sustain, and endure. I think they're Karen's words, and to create a home elsewhere, because this is all, most of it is in the 70s and 80s, right? 60s onwards, with a large number of people coming in the 80s with the insurgency in Mizoram. 60s onwards, right till the 80s. It's so there are these waves and waves of migration coming on for a variety of reasons, and often because of fairly horrific things that are happening in Mizoram, and having to really sort of flee, and then later, and so there are these different stories of migration that come in, and at the so could you tell us a little bit about that, because at the heart of a lot of the migration stories is loss and grief and a remembering of the homes they left behind, and as well as the looking into the future, you know, the aspiration for education. So yes.
So so my mother, this is my personal involvement in the book. My mother is from that community. My father is not. But I spent a lot of time in Happy Valley. Happy Valley, and now having read the book, you will understand the history of where, you know, my family came down with the clothes on their backs to escape the violence in Mizoram. That was called Rambuai, or the period of insurgency. And Happy Valley in Shillong has been discursively ghettoized, in the sense that it has been on the fringes of talks of development or socio-political, sort of discourse. So this is an attempt to sort of humanize, the stories behind these. That's the first thing. And it's also been presented in a very fragmentary way, because that is how memories work. You know, we are so conditioned to getting our narratives with beginnings, middles, and ends. And there's this professor from London School of Economics who puts it beautifully, and she says, we need more broken ways to imagine the world. And I agree with that, because life is a series of continuous fragments. It's not, it's not something that is so neat and tied up, which is why a lot of the narratives, and because they bring out memories of grief, of loss, and so it tends to be really, really fragmentary, which is what we were going for. You have anything else to add? Yeah. So that's the other thing. And also, so it was very personal, and the book, and Jude and I spoke about this, in a sense, wrote itself. Because the stories just came together. We didn't have to, there was a lot of work with the translation and the transcribing, but the stories really interconnected with that sense of grief, that sense of longing, and laced itself together and came out in that way. So that's how the book came to be, in a certain sense. Yeah.
While we were doing this book, because as you know, I don't really understand the language. Karen would translate to me, during the interviews a little bit, but, not so much. So I would wait for the translation, the transcripts and the translation to come back. And whenever they come back, I remember, I think Karen was there, I would go through it and I actually cried, So that was what, I could feel the intensity.
You cried a lot.
I could feel the intensity as they were, talking, but to actually read it and actually, sense what they were going through, I think that was something, for me, living in Shillong, Shillong is like a melting pot of so many different communities, and we usually have, all kinds of, communal rights and all that. And then this book, this project made me look at, the other communities in a different light and with a different perspective, because this is what I think we need to do at this point. I think, the inter-community relationship, we need to kind of build that. That is so important, because I think we both very, kind of intense about that. But I feel that this is where we should start, with our friends and our families and, our colleagues at work, or, and just have that kind of bonding and talk about it. Wherever there's a problem or anything, just talk about it, have conversations. I think that's the best way we can, get each other. Yeah.
I just want to add, Parismita, with your permission, just 2 minutes. It's such a privilege to sit here and be, in this really nice place when there's so much of suffering everywhere, right? We all know what is happening in Israel, Palestine. We know what is happening in Manipur. Not a day goes by that we don't talk about these things. And so, it's also, I feel, the book is an expression of a preemptive inter-community dialogue. And if you read the book, you will see a lot of, the history of how such beautiful stories came out, where, these Kasikongs who were vendors of shops would just invite these Mizo ladies who are out foraging for mushrooms, So we need to, this is what I mean when I say remembering in a new way. We need to remember that in order to be able to imagine a future, that we want. We need to remember what was in order to imagine what can be and what will be. And so, it's very close to my heart, and I see so many students here. I just want to address all of you and tell you that you do not have to be, assistant professors. You do not have to be academics. We all need to do this work of capturing and, these stories and telling them how we can. We can all do it. The purpose of this book is to inspire everybody else, hopefully to tell stories of your communities. It is only by talking to each other that we will bring about healing. So I just wanted to add that little.
I think that's a brilliant point to open the conversation out. Thank you for, this has been so wonderful, and I'm sure the audience has questions and we can take them.
Thank you so much. As you know, you had sent me a copy to read, and I felt so honored to have been given that opportunity. So thank you, and congratulations to both of you. I think you've spoken a lot about grief in this session. It's a slightly long-winded question, and you ended on that note, Karen, about encouraging people to tell stories. I feel that this book is actually an act of deep listening, and I really respect that you have listened. And this question about grief, there's a lot of that. In fact, the images for me, when I first looked at them, there was this quietness about them that I felt that you captured from spaces of grief, and I think that I got that answer now in terms of how you came together. Do you think that you would have heard differently, photographed differently, if you yourselves were not in a space of grief? And that's one question. The other is this space, the irony of this community that comes to this place called Happy Valley. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Thank you so much for that question, Kong Mary. I think, yeah, I mean, like, as somebody who loves a camera and who make images, I think for me it's always the moment. For me, it's always, what is in front of me, rather than going with a standard framework of, I'm going to pick up my camera today and I'm going to, make these pictures. But yeah, I mean, as, like we do prepare a bit, but then when you get there, it doesn't go the way you ought it to be. So I think for me, like I will say that again, I think listening is important. How you'd want to photograph, how would you want to write. So yeah, I mean, if like for me, I think grief, the struggle is always there. When I lost my father, I struggle a lot with grief, and it's actually photography that kind of helped me to come back. And because at that point I did not feel like I could do anything, like I couldn't even teach properly, so I felt pretty useless, but I think that day when I remember when I picked up the camera and I started making images again, and this time not outside but looking inwards to start photographing myself and the objects around me in my home. That is why that practice of constantly looking within my space and kind of interacting with the objects that are around me, so that helps a lot. Yes, thank you.
So for me, I think grief forces you to face yourself in a way that nothing else in the world will let you do. And in forcing yourself to face yourself, you become much more open and receptive. All of the closed pores open up, all of the closed holes, all of the closed wounds open up, and it is a searing process, but it is what makes one a better listener, at least in my experience, and I think I speak for the both of us. So that was to answer Kong Mary's question, had it not been this period, the book may have come out. I do not think it would have taken the shape it did. Secondly, to answer about Happy Valley, we tried a lot to find out the origin of the name Happy Valley. In fact, we met with the commandant of ARC, my father's ex-colleague. He tried to, but then we were unable. We were supposed to meet with the Rangbashnong, but then it just could not pan out. But it is. Happy Valley really was happy. I mean, at least in my, we would, from morning to evening, I would take my grandmother's puan, run off with it. Such happy memories, so it was a space. And if you read the book, specifically the one that is the section on memories, they talk about how some of them have described it as paradise on earth at that point of time, And now with a lot of influx and, the socio-cultural, political problems that have cropped up, one thinks of Happy Valley and one immediately either thinks of second-hand clothes, right? I don't call it thrifting because I think thrifting is a very fancy word, but second-hand clothes, or you go there for your, tungtap and your, your bamboo shoots and your miso khana, all that stuff, yeah, so there. Or otherwise discursively, always framed as a place that's a hotbed for, slightly not the not so nice things in society, alcoholism or drug abuse or all of that stuff. So, we wanted to remind through stories of the valley that Happy Valley was actually, and still is in bits and in parts, a happy valley, Khongwir.
Okay. All right, yeah, thank you for saying secondhand, first of all. Stop bourgeoising poverty. Anyway, but yeah, I have to frame this question carefully because I don't want to make you cry again. Um, yeah, so in the process of the book, I see it's bilingual, so you have two languages. So I'm assuming you do both the translation, perhaps, and the English version as well. So I've always found that within translation, especially when it comes to language, I mean, beyond the stories, just within the language itself, there are some phrases that completely just paralyze you and say, like, hang on a minute, this, it reminds you of so many other things other than just what you're reading at the moment. Like, and I think, like me, I think you've not, this journey into your own language, I think has been, it's not something that you've done as a kid, it's something you've done mostly when you're much older as well. So I just want to know how that journey has been and how that effect has been on you.
Um, uh, Thanks, Sang, for the question. You know, I grew, so my father was in the army, full disclosure. I grew up speaking fluent Hindi at home. I learned Mizo primarily because of my mom, but it was a very broken Mizo. I had to work very hard at it after coming back to Shillong. So there were, and I have to, full disclosure, there's a lovely boy named John Lal Sanswa who helped me immensely with the translations. Because I struggled with that, with capturing the essence of what was being, and these are not, these are concepts about grief, these are concepts about memory, and these are not, it's not very conversational. So with the conversations, it was easier for me to translate, but with the harder introspective pieces that I did, I required help, and I was, in fact, this is where it became a sort of community event, because I would put up on my WhatsApp status, please tell me what is Tungtap in Mizo, for instance, right? And then I would get back the responses. All of that went into the book. So it wasn't just me, and I have to acknowledge that. And it's also taught me that, and this is something I learned from June and Nathaniel as well, that to get to the roots, the language is so important. So if there has been a learning curve for me from this book, it is that I need to go back and really, really work on the language. But overall, it was a very collaborative effort, which I think added also to the book. Yeah, so.
Yes. Are there any other questions? Yes, there's one.
Hi. I had a quick look at the book and it looks really wonderful. One thing I just wanted to ask, I like that you said that I hope this inspires other people like college students, anyone to do this kind of oral history. So I was wondering, could you share maybe something that was a challenge for you? I know you said the stories did not need much work, they just came from conversation. But was there anything during the process that maybe you would share that would inspire like other people who would like to do something like this but may see it as quite daunting or, yeah.
Okay, I'll take a little bit of that, of your question. Let me tell you something about, being friends with Karen. She's from the Mizo community, and as we all know here, Mizos, if they are with another Mizo person, they'll always tend to like speak in their own language, but then, the wonderful thing is that, there is this thing of, Karen would try to explain to me, like, what are they talking about and all that. But yeah, I mean, the challenge is, I guess, when it comes to collaboration, I think a lot of us, even in the beginning, while we were talking to some people, right? And then every time, like, we don't know whether that person is going to tell us the truth of it. We don't know whether that person is going to be like, rephrasing things, or they would be telling us some other, a story. So that challenge is always there when you are capturing these stories. There is, when you go back, that is why that continuous, we went to each family, I think about 2 or 3 times. We kept going back and forth because that is important. I mean, one time you can't really get anything. The first time is just to kind of warm up, saying hi, and like, this is us. We introduce ourselves, and then, but then then we started talking to them, and we went back and forth with them, and I feel like that is one thing. I think if you do a project like this, which is I think the challenge is always there. Yeah, I think Karen can elaborate more.
So there's a couple of things. So when you do a project like this, it helps if you have an insider, right? Because then the intersubjectivity completely changes if you have somebody that you are already familiar with. But like June said, there's no shortcut. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of visits. Food is a great thing that people bond over, You just take in a couple of packets of biscuits or some goodies. Food is a great icebreaker. That's one thing I discovered. We were fed very well, which is evident if you look at us today. But also the other thing that one has to be really careful with is that I just lost my point. Food is important because once food comes, everything disappears. You have to build a sense of trust. You have to meet them. The thing is, you have to be in control of the conversation. Now, while I say that being familiar with the community helps, it can also be a hindrance, because the people I went to want to know, how is mommy? Your hair's grown so long. You've put on weight, right? And so it was very difficult for me as primary interviewer to keep a rein on the conversation into the themes that I wanted. The book did write itself, but the conversations were very, very controlled. So that balance between that free flow and the food and the fun of it, and getting into the heart of what it is you want, is very important. And June has spoken about this earlier, but I want to reiterate, it is so important that they know what is being done and that they are completely comfortable sharing what it is they are sharing, not just with you, but to be reproduced in a book, to be reproduced and shared with the world. So those are two things that are very, very, very key to me. One is the familiarity and that sense of being comfortable with them. You do it as many times as you have to meet them. But the other is also to be able to control the conversation. That is a very, very tricky one. And that's something that you learn by experience. It's not, because it's interpersonal, and so every conversation will be different. But as you go into the field and you learn the people that you are with, you learn it on the job, so to speak. So that's what I would say.
So I've been told we are not going to take any more questions. I think we are, right?
Sorry.
So no. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, you can. I mean, if you have a question, of course you can. I'm sure you'll be okay with like continuing the conversation outside, as one must, right? I mean, in case you have last concluding words. I mean, do you wish? Yes.
I just want to say thank you to everyone. I actually can't name names, but brother who's here, my principal, who has given me leave for 6 months to do this project. So thank you so much. And then yes, the NA archive team, and then my family who are here, my relatives who are here, my friends, my students who are my dear ones. And also, especially our narrators who's here, Mr. Ramzawa, Ms. Sangi, Ms. Lute. Like, thank you so much for, allowing me into your homes and, to take these stories, to take photographs of you. Thank you so much. Kanlaume, thank you so much. Thank you.
Just same. I echo her words of gratitude. My research scholars, my students, my family, in no particular order, whatever comes to mind. Brother Nathaniel, project director, our narrators. Just thank you so much, and we hope so much. This book is like June and I, and like our narrators. It is imperfect, it is flawed, but it is what it is. And we hope that it leaves you more curious than feeling like you know. So that is what we leave you with.